My brother-in-law, a man I trusted implicitly, the father of my nieces, confessed his love to my wife. It wasn't just a simple confession. It was a dark, twisted declaration that ripped our family apart and revealed a chilling obsession I never saw coming. It all started innocently enough, or so I thought. Yesterday, out of the blue, my sister's husband, my brother-in-law, reached out to my wife. He asked her to meet him for lunch, saying he had something important to discuss. My wife was puzzled when she told me, her brow furrowed. "Do you think it's about my sister?" she asked. "Maybe they're having problems, and he wants a woman's perspective." I found it pretty odd myself. This wasn't typical behavior for him. He'd never singled out my wife like this before. But then again, we're a close family. He often texted my wife and other relatives about mundane things, and we always supported each other. So I shrugged it off. "Go find out," I told her, pushing away a flicker of unease. She agreed to meet him at a cafe near her office the next day. The following morning, as she got ready for work, that hint of worry returned to her voice. "I'm still not sure what this is about," she confessed. I tried to reassure her. "It's probably nothing serious. Just listen to what he has to say, and if it's something we need to help with, we'll figure it out together." She arrived early at the busy cafe, feeling a bit more at ease in the public setting, finding a table by the window. He showed up a few minutes later, looking visibly nervous, more nervous than she'd ever seen him. They exchanged pleasantries, talked about work and the kids for a bit. But then, as soon as their food arrived, he took a deep, shaky breath and plunged into the abyss. He started complimenting her, telling her how beautiful she looked. At first, she thought he was just being polite, but he didn't stop. He told her she'd always been the light in his life, how she made him feel things he'd never felt before. "It was love at first sight," he stammered, his voice trembling. "I've loved you since the moment I first laid eyes on you. If you were mine, I would treat you like the queen you are. I'd give you everything you deserve." My wife was absolutely stunned. She just stared at him, utterly unable to process what she was hearing. This man, my brother-in-law married to my sister, father of their 2 kids, was pouring his heart out, laying it on thick, making grand, impossible promises about a life they could have together. He went on and on, claiming he'd been holding these feelings in for years, watching her, admiring her from afar, convinced they were somehow meant to be. She tried to interrupt, to tell him he was making a colossal mistake, but he just kept talking over her, as if he'd rehearsed this sickening speech 1,000 times. "You have to understand, this wasn't some distant acquaintance. This was a man who had always had a friendly, jovial relationship with my wife. Our families were incredibly close. We saw each other all the time. He was the fun uncle to our kids, always at every family barbecue, every holiday dinner. He did text my wife frequently, but it was always about mundane things, kids' schedules, family events, nothing that ever set off an alarm. He even texted my mom. We all trusted him implicitly. He was just a good guy." So, to hear my wife recount this to me later, it was like a gut punch, a true physical blow. She couldn't let him finish. She stood up abruptly, her chair scraping loudly against the floor, and walked out. Shaking uncontrollably, she called me, detailing every horrifying word he'd just uttered. As she was still on the phone with me, the texts from him started. First, apologies. He didn't mean it. He thought it was just infatuation. He was sorry for making her uncomfortable. But the damage was done. She left work early, rushing home to talk to me, her phone buzzing incessantly with his calls and messages. I told her to answer one of his calls, to put him on speaker so I could hear. And there he was crying, begging her not to tell my sister. He kept repeating it was a mistake, that he'd misread signals, that he thought she felt the same way. Apparently, during our last family gathering, he believed my wife was flirting with him, that they'd had some moment, alone in our kitchen, where he felt a connection. My wife has a strong personality, a real ball buster, as I like to say, and I guess I could see how some might misinterpret her confident, playful nature as flirting. But this was beyond anything we could have imagined. He asked if she'd told me. Yes, I answered firmly, letting him know I was on speaker. Then he started begging me too, pleading for us to keep this a secret. This went on for what felt like an eternity, him begging, us listening in stunned silence. My main question cut through the noise. "Have you cheated on my sister before?" He swore he hadn't, swearing on his kids' lives that it was just my wife, only her. "You should understand," he insisted. "It was her, only her." At that point, I was done listening. I told him I wasn't going to do anything tonight, and that I'd call him tomorrow. Adamant. We should drive over there right now and tell my sister. But the idea of wrecking my sister's family, of what this would do to my nieces, made me want to vomit. I knew deep down that telling my sister was the right thing to do, but I was also thinking about my wife. It wasn't her fault, not one bit, but I knew there'd be resentment from our family. Even if my sister didn't divorce him, even if they somehow reconciled, I couldn't see how we'd ever be a family again, not like before. This whole episode could tear everything apart. I didn't give a damn about him. He tried to destroy my family, but I cared about everyone else. By the way, if you're still with me, make sure to hit subscribe. More unbelievable stories are coming. You don't want to miss them. Everyone who told me last night that I couldn't wait to tell my sister was absolutely right. A little after midnight, my phone rang. It was my sister. Her voice was thin, upset. She had something to tell me. My heart sank. She explained that her husband, my brother-in-law, had come to her in tears, claiming my wife had tried to initiate an affair with him. He had spun a twisted tale, painting my wife as the instigator, shamelessly shifting all the blame. I could hardly believe the audacity, the sheer nerve. That's not the case. I cut in immediately, my voice tight with anger. I'll be right over. This wasn't a conversation for the phone. This needed to be faced head-on. I hung up and, with a surge of urgency, called my parents. I woke them both, explaining the nightmare in quick, clipped sentences. My father was furious. My mother, shocked but resolute, agreed to head straight to my sister's house to sit with her kids, to offer the support she would desperately need. Next, I called my younger brother. He answered groggily, confusion quickly turning to alarm as I filled him in. He promised to come to our place, to stay with our kids, ensuring they wouldn't be left alone during this chaos. His calm, steady presence would be a comfort to them. Meanwhile, my wife was already gathering her things, her face pale and drawn. She dreaded the confrontation, but knew it was absolutely necessary. We left the house in a hurry. The drive to my sister's felt impossibly long, the silence in the car heavy, both of us lost in our own swirling thoughts. When we arrived, the scene was even more tense than I'd imagined. My sister stood on the front porch with my brother-in-law. He looked utterly beaten, eyes downcast, his posture slumped in complete defeat. He knew we had the texts and voicemails, the undeniable proof of his sickening betrayal. I really don't know what he hoped to accomplish by calling my sister in the middle of the night with those desperate lies. Maybe he thought he could get ahead of the story, twist the narrative to save his own skin. But it was a futile, pathetic effort. As we walked up to them, the tension was palpable, a suffocating blanket in the night air. My wife was trembling, her face a mask of controlled anger and searing hurt. Without a word, she handed my sister her phone. My sister took it, her hand steady, but her eyes burned with a volatile mix of fury and pain. She scrolled through the texts, her expression hardening with each damning word. Then she listened to the voicemails, the irrefutable evidence of his twisted declarations and my wife's firm refusals. Before she could even speak, my brother-in-law started to sob. This man, a firefighter who runs into burning buildings, who faces danger daily without flinching, was brought to his knees. His cries were deep and guttural, raw with regret and fear. It was a surreal sight, a big, tough man shattered by his own monstrous actions. My sister's face remained impassive, a mask of stern, unyielding resolve. She'd always been tough, but right now she was unbreakable. She waited for him to finish, her silence more powerful than any words. When he finally quieted down, still hiccuping with the remnants of his sobs, she spoke. "Pack a bag and go," she said, her voice cold and clear. "I can't stand to look at you." He tried to argue, to plead his case, but she wasn't having any of it. "Stop it," she snapped, cutting through his desperate words. "There's nothing you can say that will make this better." She turned away from him, walked over to my wife, and pulled her into a tight embrace. It was a moment of profound solidarity between them, a small, much-needed comfort in the middle of this absolute nightmare. They'd been friends since college, and the strength of their bond was evident. It was an immense relief to see that, despite everything, they were standing together. That left me standing with my brother-in-law. He was a wreck, his face red and swollen from crying, his shoulders slumped. He looked at me, his eyes pleading for some kind of understanding or forgiveness, but I had none to offer. He tried to speak, his voice cracking, but I cut him off. "You need to leave," I said firmly. "This is your mess. You need to deal with the consequences." He nodded, defeated, and slowly made his way inside to pack his things. My sister stayed with my wife, the two of them talking quietly, leaning on each other for support. The rest of the night was a blur of conversations and plans. We all rallied around my sister, helping her figure out what to do next, how to protect her kids from the devastating fallout. My sister, still trying to grasp the situation, began questioning my wife. She needed to understand why her husband thought any of this could possibly work out. He must have had some reason to believe she reciprocated his feelings, my sister insisted, claiming everything in their marriage had been normal. My wife, crying now, tears streaming down her face, tried to make sense of it all. "There's nothing you haven't seen," she choked out, her voice shaking. She handed my sister her phone again, and together they painstakingly went through every text message sent over the past 2 years. They read each one carefully, searching for any hint of inappropriate behavior. But there was nothing. My wife was just being herself. She has a playful personality, always joking around and teasing. It's part of what makes her so lovable and approachable. My brother-in-law had a similar sense of humor, and they'd always teased each other in a lighthearted, harmless way. She does the same with my mom and my younger brother. It's just how she interacts with people. The only incident my wife could think of that might have been misconstrued happened just this past weekend. She recounted it, desperately trying to pinpoint where things went wrong. We were all together at our place, and she and my brother-in-law both reached for the fridge at the same time. They playfully jostled for who would get there first, laughing as they did so. He let her win, but then he reached around her waist to grab a beer, moving his hand slowly. She admitted that in that fleeting moment, the way he did it felt a little inappropriate. It was a brief, uncomfortable feeling, and she'd brushed it off, not wanting to make a big deal out of it. Now she wondered if her silence, that split second of inaction, had given him some misguided hope. My sister listened, her expression softening. She didn't blame my wife for any of this. She knew her well enough to understand that her playful nature was never, ever an invitation for anything more. "It's not your fault," she reassured her, and my wife nodded, though the crushing weight of guilt still lingered. As they finished reading through the messages, it was painfully clear. There was never any mutual attraction, no hidden signals or secret flirtations. My wife was just being herself, and my brother-in-law took that and twisted it into something monstrously false. The realization that this dark misunderstanding had caused so much pain was almost too much to bear. But at least for now, my sister's unwavering belief in my wife remained intact. Then came the true horror. My sister, fueled by a frantic anger and a deep need for answers, decided to go through his MacBook. Her hands were shaking as she typed, guessing the password. On the third try, she was in. Taking a deep, ragged breath, she started searching through his files, desperate for anything that might shed more light on this nightmare. It didn't take long before she found something truly disturbing. Buried deep in a folder labeled innocuously was a shocking cache of pictures of my wife. They dated back years, and what was even more unsettling was that they were always isolated shots, just her. Never in group settings, never candid family moments. My sister clicked through them, her anger slowly morphing into a cold, creeping horror. One set of photos stood out, chilling her to the bone. A few years ago, we'd gone on a couple's trip to the Caribbean. It was a rare vacation without the kids, and my wife, feeling more relaxed in the adults-only environment, had worn a bikini. She usually preferred more modest swimwear, but this time, she'd felt comfortable enough to do so. There were probably 50 pictures of her in that bikini, each one taken without her knowledge. My sister's face paled as she scrolled through them. It was sickeningly clear. He'd been secretly snapping these photos for years, collecting them obsessively. The realization that he'd been harboring this dark fixation, lurking in the shadows of family events, sent a shiver down her spine. Does this now enter restraining order territory? She wondered aloud, her voice barely above a whisper. This had taken a truly creepy turn, far beyond what any of us had imagined. The boundary between inappropriate and outright disturbing had been utterly obliterated. She called us over, showing us the pictures. My wife gasped, her hand flying to her mouth in utter shock. She had no idea he was doing this, no inkling of his deeply disturbing obsession. My sister, her anger now tempered by a deep, profound sense of betrayal, started talking about next steps. Legal action, protection for her kids, and a restraining order. All possibilities that now had to be seriously considered. We were all reeling from this new, horrifying discovery. The man we thought we knew, who we trusted as a husband, a father, and a brother-in-law, had shown a side of himself that was dark, sinister, and truly disturbing. This wasn't just a matter of infatuation anymore. It was something far more insidious, something truly terrifying. Unfortunately, the mess only continued to unfold. My sister, determined to get the full story, agreed to talk to her husband again, and decided to involve my wife directly to ensure there would be no lying or half-truths. They set up a FaceTime call, and I listened in off-camera, my heart pounding with a mix of anger and dread. My sister, ever thorough, recorded the entire conversation for good measure. As soon as the call began, the tension was palpable. My brother-in-law looked utterly exhausted, his eyes red-rimmed and swollen from crying. He started hesitantly, his voice shaky, but as he spoke, the truth began to pour out, and the story unfolded in a way none of us had fully anticipated. He admitted he'd been obsessed with my wife for years. "It started the day I met her," he confessed, his voice barely above a whisper. He went on to explain that it was during one of those early gatherings where my sister, eager to introduce her new boyfriend to her friends, had brought him along. My wife and I were dating at the time, but he had met her even before he met me. At first, he thought his feelings were purely physical, an innocent crush he could brush aside. But as time went on and he spent more time around her, he realized it was so much more than that. He became fixated on her personality, her infectious laughter, the genuine way she interacted with everyone around her. He described moments where he found himself simply watching her, captivated by her presence, even as she was just being herself, playful and kind. He detailed how he had tried to suppress these feelings, convincing himself they were harmless. But over time, his obsession grew, insidious and relentless. He started finding ways to be near her more often, volunteering to help with family events, making flimsy excuses to text her about trivial things. It was a slow, terrifying process that eventually led to the point where he felt compelled to confess his feelings, deluding himself into believing she might somehow feel the same way. My sister listened, her face a mask of controlled rage and profound heartbreak. She didn't interrupt him, letting him dig his own grave with each word. My wife, on the other hand, was visibly shaken. Hearing how long this had been going on, how deeply his obsession ran, was almost too much for her to bear. When he finished, a heavy silence descended. My sister finally spoke, her voice icy and measured. "What made you think that my wife would leave me for you?" she asked, her eyes boring into his. He stammered, struggling to find the right words. He again mentioned the supposed mutual attraction, the moments he had twisted and misinterpreted as signs of her reciprocation. That's when my wife and sister absolutely exploded. Their pent-up anger and frustration spilled over like a broken dam. There was a lot of cussing, a lot of screaming, the raw, unfiltered emotion of betrayal and hurt coming to the forefront. My wife abruptly hung up the call, her hands trembling, her face pale. She was immediately concerned for me, for us, assuring me repeatedly that the attraction was entirely one-sided. I believed her. I always had. Even if she found him physically attractive at some point, I knew she would never, ever act on it. She's fiercely serious about trust and fidelity, something she made crystal clear early on in our relationship. This whole ordeal was nothing more than a twisted fantasy of my brother-in-law's, a dangerous delusion that had nearly torn our entire family apart. As I sat there, replaying the chaotic scene in my mind, I couldn't help but reflect on my brother-in-law. I knew he was a little cocky, always walking with a certain swagger, but my God, I never knew he thought so highly of himself, to actually believe he could pull off something like this. His delusions of grandeur were staggering, completely detached from reality. I talked to my sister later, once the initial shock had started to wear off, and we could speak more calmly. She was resolute, absolutely determined to protect her children from the devastating fallout of her husband's actions. She told me she would be contacting a lawyer first thing Monday morning to see what steps she could take to limit his exposure to their kids. She wanted to ensure they were shielded from as much of this mess as humanly possible. As far as I'm concerned, she said, her voice steely with resolve, he's detached from reality. Her concern was no longer about saving her marriage, but about safeguarding her children and maintaining a semblance of stability for them. Anyway, my brother-in-law returned home yesterday. Not because my sister wants him back, but because, legally, she can't stop him. Despite the turmoil and the clear betrayal, he has the right to be in the house until the legal proceedings move forward. The atmosphere is thick with tension and unbearable discomfort, filled with unspoken words and palpable resentment. They're done, and I think he finally realizes that now. There's a hollow, defeated look in his eyes, as if he understands that any hope he had of salvaging their marriage is utterly gone. The lawyer told my sister that since my brother-in-law's behavior over the past few days has been thoroughly documented, there's a very good chance she will be granted full custody of the kids. The texts, the voicemails, and that deeply disturbing cache of photos all paint a clear picture of his obsession and instability. He doesn't even seem to want to fight her on that. It's as if he knows he's lost everything and is simply too weary to put up a battle. My sister will be fine. She's stronger than she looks, and any love she had for him is completely gone. She moves through the house with a determined air, her focus now entirely on her children and their future. She doesn't seem to be broken up about it. Rather, she looks like someone who's finally seen the truth and is ready to courageously move forward. The kids don't know what happened yet. They sense something is wrong, kids always do, but they don't know the grim details. My brother-in-law was never around much anyway. When the kids were home, he often slept at the fire station, pulling double shifts and overtime. His absence was a constant in their lives, a silent but ever-present gap that they had grown used to. But it is certain to be hard on them once they know what's going to happen. The stability of their home, the presence of both parents, even if it was fractured, will irrevocably change. My sister is prepared for this. She's already spoken to a child psychologist to help them navigate the inevitable questions and emotions that will arise. She's ready to be both mother and father, to provide them with the unwavering love and support they'll need. As for my brother-in-law, he stays in the guest room, a silent, ghostly figure in a house that no longer feels like his home. He seems resigned to his fate, going through the motions but devoid of any real fight. It's a sad, pitiful sight, but my sympathy for him is limited, almost non-existent. Some of my friends have wondered if there must be more women, that someone as obsessive as my brother-in-law couldn't have fixated on just one person. But as far as we can tell, there hasn't been anyone else. It's really just this singular, terrifying obsession with my wife. His fixation on her has been intense and all-consuming, leaving no room for anyone else. After everything came to light, my wife blocked his phone number, desperately trying to create some distance and protect herself from his unwanted advances. But on the very same night he returned home, he sent my wife an email from an account he had just made. It started with a seemingly sincere apology, but it quickly took a dark, disturbing turn. He began by saying he never got to finish at the restaurant that day, implying there was more he still needed to confess. Then he launched into paragraphs and paragraphs about all the things he loves about my wife. He detailed the desperation he felt, the overwhelming, irrational emotions that had driven him to act so horribly. He recounted every little detail he admired about her. Her smile, her laugh, the way she interacted with others. It was unsettling, to say the least, to see his obsession laid out so starkly, so unhinged. He mentioned their supposed mutual attraction again, insisting that there was a palpable sexual tension between them that he had always felt. He was completely delusional, mistaking her friendly, playful nature for something far more sinister. He painted a picture of a connection that existed only in his mind, a fantasy that he had convinced himself was real. And then the email ended with a rather large section about me. Let's just say I didn't know he had such a low opinion of me. He was quite certain that I was not satisfying my wife properly. He criticized everything from my appearance to my demeanor, implying that I was somehow unworthy of her. His words were a venomous attempt to undermine me, to sow seeds of doubt and insecurity. Reading that email was a gut punch, a true shock. It was horrifyingly clear that his obsession with my wife had completely twisted his perceptions and fueled his intense disdain for me. He saw me as nothing more than an obstacle, someone utterly unworthy of the woman he had placed on a pedestal. But instead of feeling threatened, it only solidified my resolve to protect my wife and my family from his dangerous delusions. We immediately forwarded the email to my sister and her lawyer. It was more undeniable evidence of his unstable state of mind, another chilling piece of the puzzle that showed just how far gone he truly was. This email, with its grotesque mix of apology, obsessive adoration, and vitriol, might just be enough to get him removed from the house permanently. For now, my wife and I are taking it one day at a time. The overwhelming support from our friends and family has been invaluable, helping us navigate this surreal and incredibly painful situation. My wife isn't doing great, but she is improving each day. She does feel a lingering guilt for being too comfortable around my brother-in-law. Normally, she is very careful about setting clear boundaries with other men. And if it wasn't clear, my wife is quite stunning and receives a lot of male attention. However, she felt completely safe around my brother-in-law because he was family, and she never, ever thought he would cross any lines. Fortunately, she and my sister are on good terms, and there doesn't seem to be any resentment, which is a huge relief. We will all be okay, but it will take time. My primary concern throughout this entire nightmare was my sister and her children. The impact of my brother-in-law's actions on their lives is immense, and ensuring their protection and emotional well-being became our absolute priority. Children especially need shielding from such toxic situations to maintain their sense of security and normalcy. When faced with such a situation, it's absolutely essential to act quickly and decisively. We didn't hesitate to gather evidence, confront the issue head-on, and involve legal help to ensure the safety and well-being of everyone involved. Procrastination or denial could have led to even further harm. What do you think about this story? How would you have handled such a shocking betrayal from someone you trusted? Please share your comments down below. Thank you for listening to Vibe Tales.